Emeka, a shy and studious young man, convinces his strict mother to let him join his classmates on an end-of-year beach trip. But what was supposed to be the weekend of a lifetime turns into an unforgettable nightmare. Emeka was the kind of student every teacher loved, but every classmate thought was a little too serious. Tall, with thick glasses and a neat haircut, he spent most of his time buried in books. He was the top of his class, always acing tests, and his teachers often said he was destined for a bright future. But while everyone admired him, Emeka wasn't entirely happy. You see, while his classmates hung out after school, posted photos of their wild adventures, or went to parties, Emeka stayed home. He was always studying or helping his Mama Afia, around the house. But deep down he wanted more, just once. The end of the school year was different. Final exams were done, and the entire school felt alive. Students were chatting, laughing, and making plans for the long break ahead. And then came the big idea: a beach trip. No teachers, no parents, just friends, fun and freedom. Emeka first heard about it during lunch. He tried to focus on his food, but their excitement pulled him in. He'd never been on a trip like this. It sounded thrilling and a little terrifying, but this was his last year in school. If there was ever a time to try something new, this was it. But there was another reason. A reason Emeka barely admitted to himself. Amarachi. Amarachi was beautiful, kind, and way out of Emeka's league. She was the type of girl who could brighten anyone's day with her smile, and Emeka had liked her for as long as he could remember. She'd always been nice to him, and this trip felt like his last chance. His last chance to tell her how he felt before they all went their separate ways. That evening, Emeka decided to bring it up with Mama Afia. She was in the kitchen peeling yams and humming a hymn softly. "Mama," he started, his voice small. "My classmates are organizing a trip to the beach to celebrate the end of the year." Mama Afia didn't even stop peeling. "Who is organizing it? The school?" Emeka hesitated. "No, Mama, just us students." Her hands stopped. She looked up at him with a firm gaze. "Then the answer is no." Emeka's heart sank. "Mama, please," he said softly. "I've always done what you asked. I study hard. I don't cause trouble. Can't I enjoy myself just this once?" Mama Afia's voice was gentle but firm. "Emeka, I trust you, but I don't trust the situation. No adults, no supervision. Anything can happen." He wanted to argue, but deep down he knew it wouldn't change her mind. He slumped into a chair, poking at his food, feeling defeated. The next day at school, the teasing was relentless. "Emeka, your mum still controls you like a baby." Oba, the loudest and most popular boy in class, laughed. The words stung, but Emeka tried to shake them off. That afternoon, as he walked home, he saw Amarachi ahead. She waved and slowed down so they could walk together. "Are you coming on the trip?" she asked, smiling. Emeka hesitated. "I don't know yet. My mum doesn't want me to go." Amarachi looked at him, surprised. "Oh, but you have to come. It won't be the same without you." Her words hit him like a lightning bolt. She wanted him there? Maybe this was a sign. For the rest of the walk, they chatted about music, food, and their plans for the future. Emeka felt lighter. That night after dinner, he couldn't hold it in any longer. Mama Afia was sitting on the couch, her Bible open in her lap. "Mama, please," he started, his voice trembling. "I've been a good student all my life. I've never asked for anything like this before. For once, let me enjoy life. I promise I'll be careful." Mama Afia looked at him long and hard. After a heavy silence, she sighed. "Fine, you can go," she said. Emeka's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes, but promise me 2 things. Don't drink, and be careful about what you eat." "I promise, Mama. Thank you," he said, relief washing over him. On the morning of the trip, the sun was bright and the air was fresh. Mama Afia hugged Emeka tightly at the door, as if she didn't want to let him go. "I will pray for you the entire time you are away. God will protect you," she said, handing him a small bag of snacks and a bottle of water. Emeka walked down the street to meet his classmates. By the time he reached the school parking lot, the energy was electric. The minibus Oba had borrowed from his father's company gleamed under the morning sun, and the place was buzzing with laughter and excitement. Some students were snapping photos, others carried coolers, bags stuffed with snacks, and portable speakers. Emeka smiled and climbed into the bus. He quietly chose a seat near the front, far from the rowdy group at the back. The engine roared to life, and the bus rolled out of the parking lot to loud cheers and the booming sound of Afrobeats. The trip to the beach felt like an adventure already. Students laughed, sang, and passed drinks around. One boy even stood on his seat, pretending to be a DJ, waving a plastic bottle like a microphone. Emeka sat quietly, clutching his bag and staring out of the window. A moment later, Amarachi slid into the seat next to him. Her presence immediately calmed him, like the noise around them faded. "Hey, Emeka," she said with a warm smile. "You're so quiet. Are you okay?" Emeka blinked, surprised she'd come to sit with him. They started chatting, and for the first time, Emeka felt a spark of excitement about something other than his books. The sun was blazing high in the sky when the minibus finally pulled up to the beach. The students let out loud cheers as they spilled out of the bus, running toward the water, carrying mats, coolers, and speakers. Oba, of course, climbed onto the roof of the bus, spreading his arms like a performer. "Let's get this party started," he shouted. The students roared back in agreement. The beach was full of life. Families picnicked under colorful tents, children played in the sand, and vendors walked around selling snacks and cold drinks. The students claimed a spot near the water. In no time, music was blasting from the speakers, mats were spread out, and bottles of drinks were being passed around. Oba popped open a bottle and walked up to Emeka with a grin. "Here, man, take this." Emeka shook his head politely. "I'm good, thanks." He remembered his mum's word and wanted to respect her rules. The beach party quickly reached its peak. Emeka watched from the sidelines, sipping his water and shaking his head with a small smile. His mum's voice rang softly in his mind. "Be careful." From time to time, Amarachi would pull him onto the sand to dance. At first, Emeka was stiff and awkward, but after a while, Emeka let himself enjoy it. He wasn't the best dancer, but for those moments, he didn't care. They danced and laughed. He looked at Amarachi and wondered, should I tell her how I feel? But every time he opened his mouth, the words disappeared. Little did he know, the day had something else planned, something that would change everything. By late afternoon, a loud scream cut through the music and laughter. "Help! Someone's drowning!" Emeka's head snapped toward the water. A girl was struggling against the waves, her arms flailing helplessly. He turned to his classmates, but they were too drunk to notice, too lost in their dancing and shouting. Without thinking, Emeka sprinted toward the shore. The sand burned under his feet, but he didn't care. He dove into the water, the cold hitting him like a shock. "Keep going," he told himself, fighting against the strong current. The girl was only a few meters away, but it felt like forever. His heart pounded, his arms ached, but he pushed through and grabbed her under the arms. Kicking hard, he pulled her back toward the shore, using everything he had. Finally, they reached the sand. The girl coughed and sputtered, gasping for air as she collapsed. A small crowd gathered, some watching in shock. But when Emeka looked around, he realized most of his friends were still partying, laughing, dancing, and drinking as if nothing had happened. They hadn't even noticed. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Emeka stayed on the edges of the group. He saw how wobbly some of his friends were getting. More than once, he had to step in to protect his drunk friends to enter the water. All night, the thought weighed on him. How are we going to get home safely? Oba, the one who was supposed to drive, was completely out of it. He could barely stand straight, let alone get behind the wheel, and they were supposed to leave early in the morning. By sunrise, Emeka was exhausted. He'd spent the entire night keeping an eye on everyone, stopping trouble before it started. He couldn't take it anymore. "I'll just rest for a moment," he mumbled to himself. He found a quiet spot away from the noise and chaos, sat down and leaned back against his bag. Before closing his eyes, he set an alarm on his phone. Just a quick nap, he thought. Hours later, Emeka woke up with a start. Sunlight hit his face. His heart sank. What time is it? He reached for his phone, but it wasn't there. He checked his pockets. Nothing. Panic shot through him. He grabbed his bag and ran back to the beach, his feet kicking up sand. It was empty. The coolers, the music, the mats. Everything was gone. Emeka sprinted to the parking lot. The minibus was gone. His classmates had left without him. His chest tightened as he ran up to a nearby shop owner who was arranging bottles. "Excuse me, sir. The students, where did they go?" The man turned to him with an angry glare. "You're one of those young people who partied all night, eh? We had to kick you all out this morning for the mess you made. Scandalous. They left 2 hours ago." Emeka froze. The words hit him like a wave. They'd left without him. His phone was gone, and he had no way to call anyone. But Emeka wasn't one to panic for long. He dusted the sand off his clothes, slung his bag over his shoulder, and took a deep breath. "I'll find a way back." He made his way to the main road, waving at every car that passed by. Most of them ignored him, speeding past without even slowing down. His throat felt dry, and fear started to creep in. What if I can't get home? He thought about his mum and how worried she must be. "She's probably scared," he whispered to himself, feeling his chest tighten. Just as the despair began to sink in, a small battered car pulled over. The window rolled down, and a middle-aged woman with kind eyes looked out at him. "Need a ride?" she asked. Emeka nodded quickly, his voice full of relief. "Yes, please. Thank you so much." He climbed into the passenger seat, grateful beyond words. As they drove, the woman asked what had happened. Emeka told her everything: the trip, the party, saving the girl, and how his friends had left him behind. She listened quietly, nodding every now and then. When he finished, she smiled softly. "You're a good boy," she said. "It's not easy to stand apart, but you did the right thing. God will reward you for that." Her words touched something in Emeka's heart. Until now, he hadn't thought much about what he'd done. Hearing her say that made him feel proud. When they reached the edge of the city, the woman stopped the car. She handed him a small bottle of water and gave him a warm smile. "Take care, my son," she said before driving away. "Thank you," Emeka called after her, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Emeka walked the rest of the way home, his legs aching but his spirit light. He was just relieved to be safe. When he reached his house, he barely had time to knock before the door flew open. "Emeka, my boy," Mama Afia cried, pulling him into a tight embrace. Her face was streaked with tears. Emeka blinked, confused. "Mama, what's wrong? I'm fine." She pulled back, gripping his shoulders tightly. "My son, your friends, they are gone." The words hit Emeka like a punch to the chest. "What happened?" Mama Afia pulled him inside and turned on the radio. A somber voice filled the room, reporting a tragic accident. The minibus carrying the students had veered off the road and rolled into a ditch. Several students had died, and others were in critical condition. Names weren't being released yet. That morning, while Emeka was fast asleep on the beach, someone stole his phone. He was sleeping too deeply to notice anything. The other students weren't much better. They were sprawled across the beach, snoring, groaning, or waking up with pounding headaches. Mr. John, the owner of the beach shop, arrived early to open his store. What he saw made his blood boil. Empty bottles, wrappers, and trash were scattered everywhere. "Hey, look at this mess!" he shouted furiously, waving his hands in the air. His eyes landed on Oba, who was stumbling to his feet. Oba's hair was a mess, his eyes were bloodshot, and he could barely stand straight. Other students slowly started waking up, some holding their heads and complaining about their hangovers. Mr. John had had enough. "All of you, leave now. This is disgraceful. I'll call the police if you don't pack up and go." Oba, barely able to process what was happening, started yelling to the group. "Get up, everyone! Pack your stuff! We're leaving now!" The students dragged themselves up, groaning and muttering as they gathered their belongings. Trash was stuffed into plastic bags, but some were too drunk to even function properly. A few tripped over their own feet, laughing at nothing, while others simply sat and stared blankly. No one bothered to check if everyone was there. They were too tired, too drunk, and too eager to leave before Mr. John called the police. Oba climbed into the driver's seat, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped the wheel. Still hung over and in no condition to drive, he took a dangerous shortcut to get home faster. He lost control of the minibus on a sharp bend, and it veered off the road, rolling into a ditch. The crash was devastating. Several students lost their lives, and others were left critically injured. Emeka sank into a chair, his mind spinning. He saw flashes of the trip, the laughter, the music, the dancing, and then he imagined Oba behind the wheel, hungover, reckless, and driving on a dangerous road. "Mama," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "It could have been me. I could have been on that bus." Mama Afia knelt beside him, holding his hands tightly. "God was watching over you, my son. He kept you safe." As the hours passed, the news became clearer. Names of survivors and victims started trickling in. Emeka's phone buzzed non-stop with classmates trying to confirm who had made it. Each name brought either relief or devastation. Oba survived, but was badly injured. 8 students had passed away. Several more were in critical condition, but there was no news about Amarachi. The silence around her name ate at Emeka. He couldn't sit still anymore. "Mama, I need to go to the hospital," he said. Mama Afia hesitated, but saw the determination in his eyes. "I'm coming with you." The hospital was packed. Parents cried, siblings held each other, and the air was heavy with grief. Emeka saw a few familiar faces, friends from school, with blank, tear-streaked expressions. They found Oba in one of the rooms, lying in a hospital bed, with a cast on his arm and a bandage around his head. He looked weak and broken. "You weren't on the bus," Oba croaked, his voice barely audible. Emeka frowned. "How do you know?" Oba's eyes filled with tears. "Amarachi noticed. She realized we left you behind and begged me to turn back. But I refused." Emeka's heart sank. He couldn't speak for a moment. Oba's face crumpled. "I messed up, didn't I?" Emeka placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're still here, Oba. You have a chance to make it right. Learn from this." He left the room without another word. He had one focus now, Amarachi. Emeka searched the hospital desperately, asking anyone he could find. Finally, a kind nurse stopped him and asked if he was looking for Amarachi. "Yes, please," Emeka said, his voice trembling. The nurse checked her records and her face turned pale. "She's in surgery right now. Her case is very serious. We don't know if she'll survive. You can see her when she's out." Emeka's knees almost gave out, but he nodded. He sat in the waiting area for hours, his hands shaking and his mind racing. When Amarachi was finally moved out of surgery, Emeka was allowed to see her. She was lying in the hospital bed, motionless, with machines beeping softly around her. She was still in a coma. Emeka sat beside her and gently took her hand. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "Amarachi, please wake up. I love you. I've loved you since we were kids. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. I need you to wake up. Please." Her breathing stayed steady, but she didn't move. Emeka sat there for hours talking to her, hoping she could hear him. Eventually he left the hospital with Mama Afia, his heart heavy with sadness. The next morning, Emeka woke up to the sound of quiet sobs coming from the kitchen. He got up quickly and found Mama Afia sitting at the table, tears running down her face. She looked up at him, her voice soft and broken. "Emeka, Amarachi passed away during the night. I'm so sorry." The words shattered him. Emeka fell to his knees on the kitchen floor and cried. He cried for Amarachi, for his friends, and for the love he never got to share. From that day on, Emeka was never the same. The tragedy didn't make him fearful, it made him wiser. He carried the lessons of the trip with him wherever he went. He continued to excel in his studies, but he also made an effort to connect with people, to appreciate the little moments, and to honor the friends he lost. He remembered Amarachi every day, her smile forever etched in his heart, and he never forgot the power of choices, faith, and doing the right thing, even when no one else would. Hey tale lovers, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. Until next time, take care and keep the stories alive.